Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 with me, Sam Paton. And once again this evening, we are broadcasting from my living room. So it'll just be a news bulletin this evening. So we'll start off with the coronavirus updates. Over the Easter weekend, from the 2nd to the 5th of April, daily updates will be published to provide only headline statistics on new cases, deaths and vaccinations. There will be no updates to the remaining statistics. There are 248 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. Not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will be tested. There was no new reported deaths of people who have tested positive. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection now stands at 7,614. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. As of 8 a.m. today, 2,565,280 people have received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, and 456,374 had received their second dose. The latest UK daily figures show 126,862 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, and an increase of 26 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings and not just hospitals. And once again, all of us at Broadcasting Scotland send all our condolences to all those families and friends. And next story. Election. Humza Yousaf pledges to reform young people's experience of the justice system. A re-elected SNP government will reform how children and young people are treated in Scotland's justice system through the introduction of the Bairnshuis. Humza Yousaf announced his party will ensure that all child victims or witnesses and their families have all the care and support and services they need to deliver under one roof at the Bairnshuis by 2025. Currently, families often have access to multiple different services in multiple locations. The move follows examination of the Bairnshuis Children's House model used in some Scandinavian countries. In the last Parliament, the SNP government also introduced the Vulnerable Witness Act to ensure that child witnesses in the most serious criminal cases will have their evidence pre-recorded away from a jury. And we are just going to show a video of Humza Yousaf talking about this new or possible new pledge to Bairnshuis.
Hello. The election campaign that will determine Scotland's future is now well underway. There are just over 4 weeks to go until people in Scotland cast their votes on May the 6th. In normal times, I and my SNP colleagues would be trying to meet as many people as possible to take our message of hope and optimism right across the country. These are, of course, not normal times, but the most serious of times. So normal campaigning is not possible, but that doesn't mean we can't have a vibrant debate over the kind of Scotland we all want to live in. Over the past year, the SNP in government has been focused on one overriding goal: keeping our country safe. Under the leadership of Nicola Sturgeon, we've worked every day to tackle the pandemic. Given the scale of this challenge, we won't have got everything right. But I don't think anyone can question the commitment of the SNP team, but most importantly, the First Minister, who has taken the tough decisions and personally explained and taken responsibility for them at hundreds of daily briefings right throughout the pandemic. So in this election, we're asking you to re-elect Nicola Sturgeon as First Minister and the SNP as the Scottish Government. These times call for experienced leadership and serious government. And that is what the people of Scotland expect and deserve. And that is what the SNP will deliver if we are re-elected on May the 6th. So in this election, the SNP's offer is this: experienced leadership and serious government to lead Scotland through the pandemic and into recovery. And when the crisis is over, and only then, we must have the right to decide whether to become an independent country and take our future into our own hands. Thanks to the incredible efforts and sacrifices of everyone in Scotland, and due to the magnificent success of the vaccine rollout, we know better times lie ahead. As you can tell, like many others, I'm particularly looking forward to the barbers reopening. But we know things can't go back to how they were pre-pandemic. We want to build a fairer recovery. The question then is this: who should decide the kind of country we will be after the pandemic? Should it be the people of Scotland or politicians at Westminster? I believe Scotland's future should be in Scotland's hands. In this election, we are leaving the political game playing and tactical ploys to the other parties. The situation facing our country is far too serious for that. And it is only the SNP which is serious about government and putting into practice the policies that will improve people's lives. In this election, a majority for the SNP, with Nicola Sturgeon as First Minister, will mean we can get things done. In government, it's been my responsibility to bring down crime and make Scotland a safer place to live. There are now more than 1,000 additional police officers in Scotland than when we came to office. Crime, including violent crime, has fallen over the last decade with the SNP in government. Glasgow was once seen as one of the most violent cities in Europe. The SNP-led Scottish Government has funded a public health approach to tackling violence, which has seen violent crime reduced by almost 40% since 2008. In fact, back in 2008, around 1 in 5 adults experienced a crime. Now that figure is down to 1 in 8. But we know there is more to do. In government, the SNP has put victims' rights at the heart of the criminal justice system. We've invested over £75 million in victim support over the last 5 years. We set up the Victims Task Force that I co-chair to improve support, advice and information for victims of crime. We will continue to support its work over the next Parliament, and we will take further action to help the victims of crime. From our work on the task force and listening directly to the views and experiences of victims, I can announce we will pass a new law to appoint a Victims Commissioner for Scotland. The Commissioner will provide an independent voice to victims and witnesses and review the provisions of victim services. Where necessary, they will provide challenge to the government and those right across the justice system if there are steps we need to take to improve a victim's justice journey. And we will develop a new funding regime for victim support organisations and introduce a justice-specific knowledge and skills framework that will be trauma-informed in its practice. We will also put forward changes to the justice system itself to help victims. Our justice system has many, many strengths, but we should always be prepared to question whether it can be further improved. In 2019, we published Scotland's Jury Research, the most comprehensive study of juries and juror behaviour ever undertaken in the UK. Scotland has a unique system with 3 verdicts: guilty, not guilty, and not proven. The research made it clear that the not proven verdict can cause confusion for many jurors. We have heard from both victims of crime and those accused of crime that a not proven verdict causes significant distress. In recognition of the strong case that has been made for its abolition, we will consult on the removal of the not proven verdict. We will work with all parties and with relevant stakeholders to take forward reform of Scotland's justice system. The SNP government is on your side and on the side of our communities. We will use all of our experience to do whatever we can to keep Scotland safe and continue to cut crime and help victims. We also know how difficult involvement in the justice system can be for anyone, but particularly difficult for children. In everything we do, we must respect the rights and well-being of children and young people. At present, young people caught up in the justice system may have to go through multiple different services in multiple locations. That simply isn't right. So if re-elected, I pledge that the SNP government will reform how children and young people are treated. Scandinavian countries have introduced a model that provides a welcoming and safe environment for children who have to engage in the justice system. All the care and support a child and their family needs is delivered under one roof at a place called the Barnahouse, the Children's House. In Scotland, we will introduce the Bairns House. These centres will operate on the principle that the needs of children in criminal cases are totally different from adults in the same situation. The child will be the centre of their work. And we will ensure that every child victim or witness will have access to a Bairns House by 2025. These proposals are part of the most ambitious policy programme any party has put before the people of Scotland in a Scottish Parliament election. The biggest NHS pay increase in the history of devolution, to show our appreciation for the heroic work of health workers over the past year. A cancer treatment recovery plan, a national care service, 100,000 affordable homes supporting 14,000 jobs a year. A laptop, Chromebook or tablet for every school pupil, so no child misses out on learning. A doubling of the Scottish Child Payment to £20 a week per child for low-income families. A £275 million fund to regenerate and revitalise town centres and local neighbourhoods. A rural entrepreneur fund and a women's business centre to help the next generation of entrepreneurs. Over the coming weeks of the campaign, the SNP will continue to roll out groundbreaking policy platform. We will set out how we will tackle the climate emergency, expand free childcare and deliver free school meals and breakfast for all primary pupils. These measures will offer practical help to people in their daily lives, but they also demonstrate the kind of country we are building. One based on compassion and fairness, which has a laser focus on the priorities of the people of Scotland. Those values will shape our recovery plan for Scotland. The pandemic has affected everyone in Scotland, but it hasn't affected everyone equally. The inequalities in our society have been laid bare like never before. So our recovery from COVID can't be a recovery just to the way things were before. The scandal of child poverty has to come to an end. That's why we introduce the Scottish Child Payment, which has been described as a game changer in the fight against child poverty. It's why we will double the payment in the next Parliament if re-elected to government. It shows the difference a measure of self-government can make to improving people's lives. And it demonstrates why we need all the decisions about Scotland's social security system to be made in Scotland, not by the likes of Boris Johnson and Tory Westminster governments that people here in Scotland didn't vote for. From the baby box to the Scottish Child Payment to free university education, the SNP in government is helping families, children and young people. Last month, the Scottish Parliament unanimously passed landmark legislation to incorporate the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child into domestic law. It was an exceptionally proud moment, not just for our Parliament, but for our entire country. It's one of the reasons we will introduce policies like the Bairns House I spoke about just a moment ago. We had hoped the UK government would follow our lead, but not only have they refused to do so, they are now threatening to go to court to strike down our new law and overturn the unanimous vote of the Scottish Parliament. They are doing so because they say this bill could constrain the powers of the UK government over Scotland. They believe Westminster's right to tell Scotland what to do should come before the rights of children. That tells you why it is so important that Scotland's future should be in Scotland's hands. Because Westminster is taking Scotland in the wrong direction. Boris Johnson's priorities are not Scotland's priorities. Westminster will hold our recovery back. Our youth guarantee will create jobs for young people, but Westminster's hard Brexit will cost jobs. We are taking action to lift children out of poverty, but the Tories' benefit cuts are plunging more families into poverty. We are investing in the National Health Service, but we know Westminster can't be trusted to protect it. We are investing in our children's future, but Boris Johnson is using Scottish taxpayers' money to pay for a huge increase in nuclear warheads. So Scotland's recovery needs to be made in Scotland, focused on Scotland's priorities, not Westminster's. That's why once the COVID crisis is over, we believe people in Scotland must have the right to decide their own future and whether they wish to become an independent country. Independence is not a distraction from recovery. It is essential for the long-term recovery people in Scotland deserve and need, because it will equip our country and our Parliament with the powers to build the better Scotland we know is possible. In an independent Scotland, the decisions about our future will be decided by the people who live here, not by Westminster. So other parties in this election, like Labour, who say we shouldn't have the right to determine our own future, well, they've made a choice. In the face of a Tory government at Westminster that is doing real harm to Scotland, they're just shrugging their shoulders. They've decided Westminster should be allowed to determine Scotland's future. They are giving permission to Boris Johnson to continue taking Scotland in the wrong direction. That's not standing up for Scotland or recovery. It's letting people in Scotland down. The SNP will always stand up for the people of Scotland. We believe it is the people who live here who should be driving Scotland's recovery. So at this election, vote SNP for the experienced, committed leadership of Nicola Sturgeon to guide Scotland through the pandemic. Vote SNP for a government of bold, progressive policies to kickstart recovery and build a fairer society. Vote SNP for the right to decide your future. On May the 6th, to build a better Scotland, make it both votes SNP.
And thank you for that. And it was nice to hear the kids in the background also enjoying themselves as well out in the sunshine. Now for our next story of the evening. The Greens vow to end fox hunting for good. The Scottish Greens will ban fox hunting in Scotland, the party have pledged. Despite an apparent ban being introduced in 2002, fox hunts continue in Scotland by exploiting loopholes that mean it can continue as much as it did. Scottish Green Alison Johnson proposed a bill in 2019 to close the loopholes and also to protect mountain hares. Mountain hare protections were won in wildlife laws last year, but the Lothian candidate has pledged to finish the job next term if re-elected. Commenting, Alison Johnson said, most people think fox hunting is already banned in Scotland, but loopholes in the law mean that hunting continues as much as it did. It is my intention to close these loopholes and end all hunting with dogs for good. When I consulted on my bill proposal to protect Scotland's foxes and hares, it received an overwhelming positive response from the public. But the job is only half done. Protections for mountain hares came into force in March, but the cruel chasing and killing of foxes with dogs still continues. Let's put an end to it after May. And for the next story, SNP offers serious leadership for serious times, says Nicola Sturgeon. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon today said the SNP offered serious government for serious times. Ms Sturgeon said the election campaign made it clear Only the SNP was offering the experienced leadership the people of Scotland needed. And she said it has never been more important to give people in Scotland a choice over their future because Boris Johnson was taking the country in the wrong direction. The SNP leader said that it is only by using both votes for SNP in this election that people in Scotland can be sure to get the serious government that is essential in these most serious of times. The First Minister emphasised that this campaign has demonstrated as never before that the SNP is the only party of government with the experienced leadership the people of Scotland deserve. Ms Sturgeon said that for the remainder of the campaign, the SNP will remain laser focused on setting out a programme for government to rebuild the Scottish economy, invest in the Scottish NHS and improve people's lives. The party's focus on building a better Scotland means that when the COVID crisis is over, people will have the right to choose independence or a Westminster government led by Boris Johnson. The SNP leader finished by saying that any party which supports or accepts Boris Johnson's job-destroying hard Brexit cannot claim to be serious about economic recovery from the pandemic in Scotland. And for our next story of the evening, Baroness Davidson gets campaign call-up. SNP Deputy Leader Keith Brown accused the Scottish Tory election campaign of being in chaos, as Baroness Ruth Davidson has been drafted in as a last-minute call-up to fight Westminster's corner, as Douglas Ross gets dropped to the subs bench. Mr Brown pointed out that Baroness Davidson is said to be ringing the alarm bell for the Union as the Tory campaign goes into panic mode 4 weeks before the election. Tory leader Douglas Ross appears to have been pushed to the sidelines as Scottish Tory HQ goes into meltdown after poor polling ratings. The SNP Deputy Leader Keith Brown jibed that Douglas Ross has failed so badly in his short time as the Scottish Tory leader that with the Tory campaign going into panic mode, the party have dropped him to the subs bench and rolled out Baroness Ruth Davidson to be Boris Johnson's representative in Scotland. Mr Brown added the Douglas Ross is used to being on the sidelines in his refereeing career, but now he's there in his political career too. It is desperation from the Tories that the only option they have left is to wheel out Baroness Davidson before she skulks off to her £300 a day job in the unelected House of Lords. She is the democracy denier-in-chief, said Mr Brown. Well, there we go. And next story. Dozens of aristocrats claim under UK furlough scheme. Dozens of members of the UK's land-owning I can't even say the word, but the aristocrats, yes, have claimed under the taxpayer-funded furlough scheme to pay staff at their ancestral estates and personal businesses. The analysis of publicly available data reveals the names of at least 50 nobles, including dukes, earls, viscounts, barons and marquises, who have drawn on public funds. The list includes owners of vast inherited estates with a combined area nearly the size of Worcestershire, as well as hereditary peers already paid by the taxpayer to sit in the House of Lords, and the owners of multi-million-pound art collections. The details of the aristocrats, use of the furlough scheme emerged after following reports that tax exiles, Saudi royals, oil-rich Gulf states and multi-billionaires had also drawn on taxpayer support to pay furloughed staff. The latest snapshot reveals that claimants, including companies owned by the Duke and Duchess of Rutland, who are divorced and live in separate parts of the Duke's ancestral home, Belvoir Castle, which sits in 15,000 acres of Leicestershire parkland and has featured in The Crown. Treasury disclosures suggest that the pair made 4 claims for up to £10,000 in December, increasing the amount to between £10,000 to £25,000 in January, when a national lockdown took hold. They also own the Engine Yard Cafe and Bistro and a clothes shop, the Duchess Gallery, which claimed up to £55,000 between them over 2 months. The Duke, a former UKIP supporter, was listed as having an estimated wealth of £125 million in 2013, Sunday Times Rich List. Although he sold an item from his art collection, a painting by Van Dyck, to fund the estate's upkeep, the pair did not respond to requests for comment. Wellington Estates Barn, which has 1 employee during 2019, received up to £10,000. Companies House data lists the Earl of Mornington, heir to the title Duke of Wellington, among persons with significant control over the company. An environmental consultancy owned by Christopher Monkton, the 3rd Viscount of Brenchley, a former advisor to Margaret Thatcher, a former deputy leader of UKIP, is listed as one of the smallest companies to claim taxpayer support, with 1 employee as of 2019 listed in its latest accounts. The firm received £10,000 in both December and January. One of the largest claimants amongst the companies linked to the Aristocrats is Brecon Castle Centre, a country park, shop, cafe and garden centre in the grounds of a castle built in the 13th century near Angus, Scotland. The company received up to £100,000 in January after increasing its claim from up to £10,000. Its owner, the Earl of Dalhousie, is also Lord Stewart, a senior official of the royal household personally appointed by the Queen. Many of the claims were in the names of peers themselves rather than the companies they own. HMRC said this was because of an ongoing process ironing out the detail in the vast repository of data. 3 hereditary peers are also listed among the claimants. They are the Earl of Lindsay, Earl of Howe and the Earl of Glasgow. The Earl of Lindsay is understood to have claimed over £2,000. And for the next story of this evening, cutting aid will damage UK leadership of the G7 and the COP26 summit. Boris Johnson has been told by a number of Tory former ministers and servant MPs that he risks jeopardising Britain's leadership at the G7 and the COP26 climate summit this year if he goes ahead with plans to cut UK aid by a third over 2 years. Sir David Lidington, who was Theresa May's de facto Deputy Prime Minister, will tell an Institute for Government conference on the G7 on Tuesday that the proposal to drop the UK's commitment of 0.7% of gross national income will make it harder to achieve the Prime Minister's ambitious objectives for both the G7 and the climate summit. Antti Mangle, who was the advisor to William Hague at the Foreign Office and now an MP in the new intake, will join the warning about the impact on the UK's leadership status, saying that the UK is the only G7 country cutting aid, and yet we are hosting the G7 summit in the UK in June. The government is refusing to put plans to cut aid from 0.7% of gross national income to 0.5% to a Commons vote, although legal advice given to Tory MPs suggests that a decision to miss the target deliberately may be unlawful and a potential subject of a judicial review. And now we're heading over to Russia. Putin signs a law allowing him to run for 2 more terms in the Kremlin. Russian President Vladimir Putin has signed a law allowing him to run for 2 more terms in the Kremlin, once his current term ends in 2024, according to a document posted on a Russian government website today. The legislation, which could pave the way for Putin to stay in power to 2036, should he decide to stand again and win re-election, reflects the sweeping changes to the constitution that were brought in last year. And now our story on Pope Francis. Pope slams weapons spending in the time of the pandemic. On Easter Sunday, in his Easter message, Pope Francis urged countries to quicken distribution of COVID-19 vaccines, particularly to the world's poor, and called for armed conflict and military spending during a pandemic scandalous. Coronavirus this has been the second year in a row that Easter papal services have been attended by small gatherings at a secondary altar at St. Peter's Basilica instead of the crowds in the church or in the square outside. After saying Mass, Francis read his, I do not speak Latin, Urbi et Orbi, to the city and to the world, so my apologies if my Latin is not very good, message in which he traditionally reviews the world problems and appeals for peace. The pandemic is still spreading, and while the social and economic crisis remains severe, especially for the poor, nonetheless, this is scandalous. Armed conflicts have not ended and military arsenals are being strengthened, he said. Francis, who would normally have given the address to up to 100,000 people in St. Peter's Square, spoke to fewer than 200 people in the church, while the message was broadcast to tens of millions across the world. The square was empty except for a few police officers enforcing a strict 3-day national lockdown. The Pope asked God to comfort the sick, those who have lost a loved one, and the unemployed, urging authorities to give families in the greatest need a decent sustenance. He praised medical workers, sympathised with young people unable to attend school, and said everyone was called to combat the pandemic. Francis, who has often called for disarmament and a total ban on the possession of nuclear weapons, said there are still too many wars and too much violence in the world. May the Lord, who is our peace, help us to overcome the mindset of war. Noting that it was International Awareness Day against anti-personnel landmines, he called such weapons insidious and horrible devices. How much better our world would be without these instruments of death. In mentioning conflict areas, he singled out praise the young people of Myanmar, they committed to supporting democracy and making their voices heard peacefully. More than 550 protesters have been killed since February. One military coup in Myanmar, which the Pope visited in 2017. Francis called for peace in several conflict areas in Africa, including the Tigray region of northern Ethiopia, the Cabo Delgado province of Mozambique. He said the crisis in Yemen has been met with a deafening and scandalous silence. He has appealed to Israel's and Palestinians to rediscover the power of dialogue and to reach a two-state solution where both can live side by side in peace and prosperity. And that's us for this evening, and thank you for joining me this evening for tonight's news bulletin. And as always, we ask for your support, whether it is for basically volunteering, coming on board. We're always looking for volunteers. The more the merrier. It could be It can be in front of the camera or behind the camera. We are currently involved in a campaign to raise money to actually employ staff, which would be really good because then we can grow the station as well and bring you the services that you deserve. And one of the ways you can do this is subscribing every month, £5 a month, or by donating to Broadcasting Scotland. If you can't do so, we understand it's very difficult times for people. Even just spreading the word and sharing our broadcasts would be greatly appreciated. And we are always free to view as well. So please pass the word, and all the details will be popping up on your screen. And that leaves me to say thank you for joining me. And please join us tomorrow night for another fabulous show. And take care and stay safe.
What distinguishes Broadcasting Scotland from a website or blog, apart from our brilliant programmes?
Hi there, I'm Gordon Ross.
Are the costs we face to enable us to produce those programmes. These costs are significant and ongoing. However, our facilities are able to do so much more if only we had the staff. In the last year, some of our supporters have cancelled their subscriptions. In one way, we would prefer it if it was because they didn't like us, rather than it being because of the financial pressures which we are all under because of COVID. The really positive outcome of our fundraiser is that at a time of economic challenge in Scotland, we will use your donations to create jobs and in a small way contribute to improving the Scottish economy. If you want us to be Scotland's independent broadcaster, able to provide an alternative mainstream television platform, then please support us.
Scotland is going to be an independent country.
Just imagine what we could do if we had even 1% of the BBC Scotland channel's budget. Imagine. And then please consider turning your imagination into reality. Please support us if you can afford it.